Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to quickly ask if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in getting the show in front of other listeners. If you listen on a platform that doesn't do reviews, please follow us on social media, like the show, or leave a comment. Thank you. We love you guys, and we hope you enjoy the show.
That'll work.
That actually sounded real cool.
Actually sounded kind of like a whiskey bottle.
I know. You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katy.
Welcome back.
Do you feel better? I feel better.
I feel so much better.
We just had like a nice little trauma dump before we started recording. You know, one of Walker's daycare teachers was just let go, out of the blue.
Out of nowhere.
I still don't know what happened, and I'm just kind of reeling. I mean, I'm upset. I'm more upset for her than about losing her.
Yeah, you're feeling like secondhand trauma for her.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's just I'm an empath, so I'm feeling her feelings.
And she confronted you with it.
Yeah.
Really suddenly.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't. What?
Yeah.
I was like, everything was fine last night when I saw you for parent-teacher conferences.
Yeah.
And then Hannah had a traumatic experience with a
flying water bug. Again, in my bedroom, hiding in my curtains. Just keep them on the floor. Oh, and then, I forgot about this part, everyone. There was one, where was he? Our cabinets in the kitchen, which we've taken care of this problem because we had a gap, and I finally made Jarek caulk the space in the gap. But he was peering over the ledge of the cabinet, and of course we had just made food, and so we had this pan of food. And I was like, Jarek, get him. So I held the pan of chicken and vegetables, and Jarek
got the shoe.
He swatted this roach down, and then of course then it's a game of get it before it gets away. This thing crawled up the leg of one of my kitchen chairs and got into the chair, and so then I was like, Jarek, it's in the chair, but you have to do something. And so then we had the chair, and Jarek's like, oh, man, the legs on this chair are really wobbly. I was like, this is not the time for that.
Ignore the ADHD urge to switch gears to a new project.
And truthfully,
no. Stay focused on this one task.
Truthfully, one of the legs did come off while we were trying to shake this.
That's a problem for future Hannah and Jarek.
It is. But we had and he had to beat the chair until this water bug fell out of it, and then we killed it. Just not a good time.
I don't know. It kind of sounds like an episode of The Three Stooges to me, so.
Yeah, with trauma.
And who's kind of the dumb one? Is it Curly or
all
no?
of them?
I mean, they're all dumb, I know, but no, one of them's
dumber than the other one?
Yeah, one of them's the ringleader.
I don't know. All I know is
one of them's I don't know. It's been so long since I've seen The Three Stooges. But anyway, Kelly's the dumbest of the dumb.
Kelly was not even in the room. She was like, I don't know.
I think you were probably the ringleader by yelling and doing. Yeah. And then there's the other one that's like, oh, I'll do this. No, I'll do this. Oh, no, the leg fell off.
Oh, my gosh. So much happening. It's ridiculous. And then last weekend, we just, it was go for us. Because we had Tolly. And I know I'm telling this to, you who has an 18-month-old all the time. And I'm like, we had one for
20 months.
Oh, gosh, he is.
As of today, actually.
Jeez. I was like, we had one for 24 hours. And he was actually the most well-behaved child ever. Which I think was a trick. But anyways, we had him and then immediately went to Raleigh for a to see my parents. As soon as we got there, I immediately went to a football game with my parents. Didn't get home till 12:30. And then had to sleep on the couch because Jarek was snoring. And then woke up feeling sick. And then spent all day Sunday with my parents doing like birthday stuff, and then came home and then recorded and then got attacked by a water bug and then went to sleep, and then it was Monday and I was like, what happened? And now we're here.
It's Thursday, and
it's a holiday weekend though for me.
Yeah, for
at
you.
least. I don't have to work tomorrow, which is nice.
School is closed tomorrow, which means Walker is at home with me all day. I mean, I've got stuff planned. I think we're gonna go to the nature park because they've got like the planetarium. Like, I don't think we're gonna see an actual planetarium show, but they've got like the big heart that you can walk in. There's lots of it's like a little science museum, science and nature museum.
Where is that?
In Kinston.
Oh, I didn't know there was one out there.
The New Sway Nature Park.
Okay.
So we're gonna go tomorrow morning with Bianca and Tali, and there's a new yarn store in town. So we'll be going there.
That's exciting.
Yes,
very exciting.
And might go down to the Lowe's. Walker likes going to Lowe's.
There you go. Full day for you.
Yeah. Oh, it'll be a full day. And in between all of the fun and activity and chasing around a 20-month-old, I will be doing some more finishing touches on getting my house ready for my mother-in-law. Nice. She's coming in on Saturday.
Nice.
Yes, so I'm very excited. And actually, if she is up to date on listening to the podcast, she will be hearing this as she is driving home.
Yay! What a great episode for her to listen to.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. I do have content warnings at the beginning of this.
Bring it on.
But first, I'm going to do my announcements.
Okay.
I want to announce again, which is to just reiterate the local clothing brand that we are partnering with / doing shout-outs for / cross-promoting with. It's called Aware. And I didn't mention this last time. The way it's spelled is A semicolon WARE. Anyways, it's a clothing brand, and like the funds and everything are going to support mental health awareness, suicide prevention, drug overdose prevention, pretty much anything that we support in terms of mental health awareness, breaking the stigma of mental health, all that stuff.
I've got the website pulled up, and their mission statement right here is just 3 easy bullet points.
Cool.
Normalize conversation regarding mental health, remove stigma, provide resources.
Love it.
Short, sweet, to the point.
Yes.
All good stuff.
Yeah. And I actually like I don't want to say I actually like their clothing because that makes it sound like it's bad.
I like the little skeleton hands doing a little peace symbol.
But like
That's
it's very
cute.
kind of on brand with ours. Once I'm in a better financial situation, meaning once we're a 2-income household again, I will be purchasing some. But
I'm adding 1 or 2 of these things to my Christmas wish list.
Ooh, great idea, Katy, because the holidays are coming up.
You know what else I'm adding to my Christmas wish list?
What?
Well, I've been really wanting that Sasquatch not built for beauty or speed logo design. I would love it on a workout tank. Like, I would love to go to the gym.
I want one on a workout tank too.
And you know what? You could probably get one at our Redbubble store with lots of other. We have a couple of other logo designs. I'm working on another one. But you can put that on anything, really. You know, stickers, coffee mugs, hats. I've got a pillowcase, sweatshirts, workout tanks, all that good stuff. You just go to redbubble.com, search The Tales We Tell. And if you're in a giving, with 'tis the season for giving and not about getting stuff except for, I don't know, early access, commercial-free listening, some bonus content, and we send out stickers and love notes from time to time, you can become a patron at patreon.com, search The Tales We Tell. And then while we're at it, since I'm doing my spiel all topsy-turvy like, I do have a dossier for tonight's episode.
Yep, you do.
And all the pictures in that dossier that I'll be looking at tonight, you can see at our Facebook and Instagram. Just search The Tales We Tell. And if you want to see pictures but you don't do the social media, just go to our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. and all photos and everything are there. And that's actually like my goal for the new year is to like really dive into and like kind of revamp and update our website and put more information. And you know, since we've got a live show, you know, all the details TBD, but coming up in the nearish future, you know, I'd like to be able to put all of our events and stuff also on there.
Yeah, great.
And because we have a recording of our, like a video recording of our first live show.
Yep.
I would love to be able to upload that.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yep. And
our website is also, I think, the only place where we have the video of the Utah house.
Yeah.
Where we went. Well, where Jarek and I went with his cousin.
So, anyway, we got all that out of the way.
Yep. Also, our social media are where you can find the links for not only the sources for the episodes, but also it's where I put the links for the Aware website. They also have an Instagram, which I tagged them in our last post. I'll tag them in this post. So you can check them out on Instagram, on Facebook, also just their website. So stuff like that. My next announcement was just a mental health check-in, which I feel like we kind of did.
Yeah, we definitely did. You with your bug trauma, me with my, I don't know, triggering my abandonment issues.
But I did want to just, I guess, encourage our listeners to, I don't know, check in with yourselves, check in with your friends, your family.
And I think talking to, like, if you're feeling stressed or anxious or anything, like, just find somebody to vent to.
Yeah.
Like, because, I mean, I didn't realize that I needed, like, a little mental health check-in until I kind of vented and, like, totally unloaded.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel better about this now.
I know sometimes you feel better if you just talk about it. Sometimes, like, I have found it so incredibly helpful. Like, I've made Jarek my one person, well, Jarek and my therapist, but like, I will tell him, like, my weird things that, like, trigger my anxiety, because they're the dumbest things. And, like, they're also my deepest insecurities where I'm like, I know I shouldn't be freaked out by this. I know I shouldn't be obsessing over this. And so I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm just going to secretly obsess over it in my brain and let it ruin my day for a week. But since I started deciding that I was just going to tell Jarek, like one day I was just like, I'm just going to tell you all the irrational stuff.
He's just your living journal.
Yeah. And it helps so much because I can just be like, we'll be walking out the door and I'll be like, I just need to tell you really quick that I'm just having some anxiety and it's about this dumb thing. and I can even tell him, this is what I need you to tell me. I need you to be the rational brain. I need, like, and just tell me the truth.
Or I don't need you to say anything other than, that sucks.
Yeah. Or you're not crazy.
Or yeah, you're not crazy. Or that sounds really difficult. Or that sounds, very stressful or very upsetting. Just validate.
Yeah. So,
as I'm trying to do with my toddler's tantrums, validate.
Validate.
I understand that you're mad at me because I gave you the green cup that you asked for.
Yeah. Again, such a bitch. You are, not him. Sorry. To clarify.
Ever. Yeah, no, he's perfect. I suck.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Warn me about the content.
All right, content warning. I am giving this a tentative PG-13 rating. Okay, my content warnings are for, we're going to mention some sexual assault. We're also going to briefly touch on just some topics of a sexual nature, which you'll understand when we get there. Graphic content in general, and then just a brief mention of suicide.
Okay, yeah,
So.
I think PG-13,
I don't think it needs to be an R-rated episode. It's not. This is not an Albert Fish situation.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one though.
Yeah.
So, the last 2 days I've been like really, I read a book for this. So that is where I got a lot of my information. And I will say the book was written by a psychiatrist who examined this person. So it might be a little biased. I'm also a little biased because he had different opinions than a lot of other people.
Interesting.
But also I've just been reading the book for the last week and it's very interesting to me. Okay. So I'm going to tell you the story of Richard Speck. And if you want, he's your first picture. So you can just look at him if you want, because I'm going to tell you about his life.
Oh. Okay.
They're both mugshots, so, you know.
This first one, he's kind of cute.
Yeah, he's a little younger in the first one.
Yeah. The second one, he's seen some shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
he looks...
Oh, my.
He's been through some shit.
He's been through it.
Yeah.
I love his ears. They're so, like, big and sticky outy. Okay.
All right.
Texas boy, huh? Or at least he was arrested in Dallas.
He was definitely arrested in Dallas. Our story's going to take place in Chicago. So he was born Richard Benjamin Speck on December 6th of 1941 in Kirkwood, Illinois. His parents were Benjamin Speck and Mary Carbaugh. He was the 7th of 8 children.
Oh boy.
I know.
Catholic.
Unclear.
It's in Chicago, so it's...
Yeah. I'm sure it said somewhere in the biography and I just didn't write it down. So he had 2 brothers and 5 sisters. His younger sister, Carolyn, he and her were, I think, a lot younger than the rest of their siblings.
Okay.
So, like, kind of a big gap between...
They were the bonus babies.
Yes. Their family moved to Monmouth, which I don't know if I'm saying that right, Illinois, shortly after Richard was born. So that's where he grew up. And when Richard was 3 months old, he, according to his mother, and according to this book, he had a bad case of pneumonia. So 3 months old.
That's scary.
I know. And it's 42 at this point. So he gets pneumonia. He's hospitalized for a month. He gets put on oxygen. The way it was worded in the book was he was put in an oxygen tent.
Yeah, because you can't keep, like...
Yeah.
I mean, I had to,
I
told you, wrestling like a crocodile.
Yeah.
Because I feel like wrestling an alligator would be easier than a crocodile.
Probably. Yeah, we did talk about crocodiles.
But also, Walker has now come to terms with his inhaler. We haven't had to use it for the past couple of days. Good. It's been great, but the last couple of times he was like, "Oh, I know this game. Like, I can breathe now.
I feel better."
Yeah.
So yeah, he had to be given oxygen, and then apparently the doctor told his mother that he may have suffered brain damage due to the lack of oxygen. And the way that he allegedly said it to the mother was, you probably won't see any effects of it now, but later on you may see effects of brain damage. And that did not come out until much later in his life. So that story, I'm just putting things in chronological order because it makes sense to me. That story doesn't come out till a lot later.
And basically, Mom kept that in her back pocket until later on.
Yes. But it's important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, I'm assuming, like, he's got 2 mugshots that I've seen.
Yes. He has many more.
And he's on our podcast, so I'm assuming he's done some bad things.
Yeah.
And again, by, pointing out his, early childhood brain injury or early childhood illness.
The first one.
We're not excusing.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I guess if this is your first time listening, we should point out, it goes without saying throughout the entire episode, nothing that we are saying is excusing any criminal behavior. We just want to talk about...
Yeah, we like looking at the
whole picture.
The mental health aspect behind bad people and the terrible things they do.
Yes. And this is...
And I guess it's no, we can say bad people.
Yeah.
I was gonna walk that back, but no. We're not looking to excuse their behavior, but explain and understand why, like, what they could have been through or experienced or what could have happened to them that would, you know, inform their actions or whatever.
Yeah. This is actually, like, another good example of a whole thing that I feel like the theme of my brain, or I don't know, certainly a theme in the stuff that I'm looking into with my future Sam Shockley episode. But this idea, and I think we've talked about it before, of looking at the circumstances that people were born into. I know we talked about it in the Alcatraz episodes, but like looking at the circumstances that they were born into that they couldn't help. What am I trying to say?
there's always a socioeconomic factor.
Yeah, and
there always has been. Unfortunately, I'm sure there always will be. But yeah.
Yeah, and I just feel like it's easy for everyone, us, me included, to very quickly judge someone for criminal behavior and kind of jump to conclusions without understanding or realizing I have never been in their exact situation.
You know, it's just our privilege bias or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. You know, like we were both raised in, you know, loving homes, loving supportive homes that, you know, could afford
housing
more, could afford the basic necessities and then some. And, you know, some luxuries, some extra privileges, like, so.
Yeah. Well, and even not just that, but, like, I mean, looking into, like, the ways that our mental health issues affect us, like, I mean, I can't speak for you because I don't have ADHD, but, like, my mental health stuff didn't really affect me in school, or didn't really affect me much until I was an adult. And so, for me, school was, like, mostly easy. And I didn't really struggle in school. I mean, like, socially, sure, but, like, academically, it wasn't, like, a fight to get me to go to school. And I also, like, it was assumed I was going to go to college. That was just how it was. That is not the case for everyone. It is certainly not.
School wasn't a challenge, and its lack of challenge is what was a problem.
Yeah.
Then there was the whole, like, my lack of diagnosis.
Yeah.
And the lack of understanding of, like, and then just being called lazy and, you know, other not nice things is what led to, like, my traumas. Of, you know, like, I still struggle every day of just trying to feel good enough because for years it was, why can't you just do this? Like, why are you being lazy? Like, why can't you just focus? Why can't you just do this? Yeah. Just do this. It's not that hard. I'm like,
well, and that's a good example of someone just being like, just do it. It's not that hard. And you're like, our brains don't work the same way.
I know it's not hard. I know I need to just do it. I cannot physically make myself do the thing.
Yes. So. I'm glad we're laying the groundwork here.
Okay. Am I going to relate to Dick Speck? Because
no, you're not.
Richard or not.
No, this is where it ends.
He's gonna be Dick Speck.
Apparently he hated being called that, so
I was trying to be an adult when you told me his name was Richard Speck. And I was like, most of the time, Richard, I'm like, meh. Well, we'll just call him Richard, unless they prefer being called Dick. That's the preferred nickname.
That is my dad's name, and he goes by Dick.
Yep. So, and that's not funny to me.
Yeah. No, yeah.
But
if it's well, and if they go by Richard and they're a bad person.
Yeah. And also, if your last name is Speck, like, that just adds to a little fun, you know, that just adds to the immaturity of it. That's Dick Speck.
True. That's funny.
Like, you either have, like, a speck of a dick. It's so tiny, it's just a little speck. Or you've got, like, some weird speck on your dick.
Yeah. So. Interesting.
It can go both ways.
Okay, let's move past him being 3 months old. In 1947, his father died of a heart attack at the age of 53. So he was 6 when that happened. And then 3 years later, his mother remarried a man named Carl Lindbergh, who was a female. He was a heavy drinker. He had several criminal charges on his record, which I believe were mostly DUIs and forgeries. I don't know what he was forging. But no one liked him. Like, none of the kids liked him.
Well, no, because he's a drunk asshole.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, too, before you even said anything, before you said anything after his dad died, I was like, his mother remarried, probably an alcoholic, most definitely a bad, mean guy. Yeah. And it's just she's got 8 kids.
Yep.
Do you know how old the oldest one is at this point?
I think they were old enough to be out of the house because the implication that I have next is that it was just Richard and Carolyn who moved with them. Because
that was my next thing. I'm like, it always seems like, especially, this is still the mid to late 40s?
Early 50s.
Early 50s. Mm-hmm. So women are not in the workforce, really.
No, we're not.
Not by and large. Mm-hmm. And so they lose their husband.
Yeah.
They need to find a new income source, aka a new husband.
Yes.
And the pickings are really slim, for being older. Mm-hmm. Obviously I'm not saying she's old. Yeah. I'm just saying she's older because she's got grown children.
Right.
And also having a lot of children.
A bunch of kids.
Like, the pickings are slim. Mm-hmm. You gotta take what you can get as fast as you can, and it always seems to be some mean drunk.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I don't care about, the kids or anything else. I just want, they're just looking for a maid, basically.
Yeah.
A maid and a personal chef. Like, I'll go to work and I'll pay for the house, but you clean the house, you cook my food, you take care of me.
Yeah.
And I'll drink and yell.
Yeah. It does suck.
Sorry. I'm on fire.
That's okay.
I'm lit up tonight, and I don't know why.
That's good. So Mary and Carolyn and Richard moved to, I have Santo, Texas. I don't know if I meant to write San Antonio. Santo, Texas. Is that a place? Mm-hmm. Okay. They moved to Texas. I really should proofread my notes. To live with Carl after Mary and Carl got married. And over the next 12 years, they would live in 10 different houses or apartments. I don't know why. Okay, Santo, Texas is a place. I wrote it down correctly. Great. Good for me.
Lots of different houses and apartments?
Yeah. I don't know why.
I would imagine, if he's a mean drunk, he might yell. Yeah. There might be, noise complaints. There might be...
I thought maybe it was because of his job. He was an insurance salesman, I think. But he was also I think had a leg amputated in the war. Very unclear. Not important either.
Oh, well, I wonder if he's got some PTSD that's leading to the drinking and the meanness.
I know. Okay, so Richard, unfortunately, is not having a great childhood. He sustained several head injuries throughout his childhood. So, according to the book I read, which was called Born to Raise Hell, which will make sense later on, and this was written by Dr. Zaporin, who was his psychiatrist. When Richard was 5, he accidentally hit himself in the head with a claw hammer. When he was 10, he fell out of a tree and landed on his head, and he lost consciousness for about 2 hours, and also allegedly was twitching and foaming at the mouth, which to me sounds like he was having a seizure.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Around 11, he ran into a steel awning rod.
Why have they not equipped this kid with a helmet?
Unclear. At 14, he fell out of another tree and lost consciousness again. Also, that same year, he ran into a parked car with his bike and also lost consciousness.
So, by the time he, I'm sure, commits his first crime, he's got, 2 brain cells left that are...
Yeah. And then at 16, he got into a fight with another kid, and this is according to him. He said that a cop broke up the fight and then hit him in the head repeatedly with a club, and he lost consciousness. Which sounds very similar to what happened to Sam. Sorry to keep referencing, like, the single one Alcatraz episode that maybe no one else listened to. But frequent head injuries, I know I'm not incorrect in this, but I know that losing consciousness from a head injury is, that's super, super bad.
Big thing. You know, it's one thing, like, concussions are bad.
Mm-hmm.
You want to avoid a concussion.
Do you?
You want to avoid multiple concussions.
Yes.
But what you really, really want to avoid is being knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really funny whenever I go back and watch, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Uh-huh.
It's almost every episode Xander gets knocked out.
Well, I feel like the only reason
they finally acknowledged it in, like, season 7 or something. He's like, I'm just so glad I didn't get, I was like, I wasn't knocked unconscious during that fight. I should probably see a doctor about that or something like that.
Well, I think the only reason I know about this is because I feel like at one point there were so many listicles on the internet that were, like, things that movies get wrong or whatever. And one of them, it would be like, if you get shot, it's not, you can't just keep fighting or like, a bullet wound isn't really as insignificant as whatever they'd make you believe. And then one of them was like, getting knocked unconscious is a really big deal. Yeah. And if you get knocked unconscious, you should be seen by a doctor and be getting, like, multiple scans of your brain to make sure
probably,
that,
like, yearly checkups, and
it's not just to get up and continue on with your day and like maybe you've forgotten something. It's like there's probably some significant tissue damage.
And I'm not a doctor.
You are a scientist.
I am a scientist. And while adrenaline is a hell of a drug, and yes, you can, like, if you get shot, depending on, like, where you're shot, I'm thinking, like, shoulder or arm or something.
Sure.
You can still do, I'm sure, a significant amount.
Yeah.
But, the movie's probably very much overhyped. Because, there's the whole, like, mothers lifting cars off of their children, like, adrenaline. And your body is actually a lot stronger than you are actually aware, because your brain is like, no. You're like, I can lift this, and your brain is like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
Because, well, yes, technically you can. You will hurt yourself.
Yes.
So, no, you can't.
Yes.
And you're like, I guess I'm not strong enough.
Okay, so after this last incident where he was 16, he began getting frequent headaches. Shocker.
Wow. Surprising.
I know. And these would last presumably his entire life. He had already begun drinking at age 12. And after the headache started, he began to increase the amount that he was drinking in an attempt to alleviate the headaches. And I think this is also when he started doing drugs to try to help alleviate the headaches, which, again, kind of makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, there are times that, I'm like, I'm going to have, like, I don't particularly feel like having a glass of wine, but I'm going to have a glass because it might, alleviate the pressure or whatever.
Yeah. And there was
alcohol thins your blood.
Yeah. There was a point in this book where
not a doctor,
but a scientist.
Barry, I wish you listened to a podcast so you could text me with the doctor stuff.
I almost texted your husband about some of the drug stuff, but then I just looked it up on, like, mayoclinic.com.
Quick critter story.
Yes.
Picked him up from school today,
and
apparently, like, literally right before I walked in the door, one of the teachers asked and said, Walker, are you going to go see your dad at the pharmacy? And you know what he said?
What?
Farm?
Farm?
We haven't taught him that.
Aw.
That's just him repeating.
I love that.
So, going to the pharmacy? Farm?
When I went to pick up my medication the other day, Shelton waved at me because he was, like, busy. And
yes.
Obviously. And someone saw him wave and I guess didn't see me. And so I guess they thought it might be you. And so they asked, oh, is your baby here? And he was like, no, that's just my friend Hannah. And then he goes, Hannah, did you bring Walker? And I was like, no, I didn't. And then the lady who was helping me, she was like, oh, do you watch The Baby? And I was like, no. I was like, I'm just friends with them.
Videos online, yeah.
I was like, I'm just friends with them. Mostly his wife. I just hang out with them. Richard also struggled in school.
I'm so surprised by this information. Wow. What a revelation.
I know. Well, to add to all of the other things we know about him.
Insult to multiple injuries.
I know. And, like, I'm sorry if you know the story and you don't want me to feel bad for him, but he had poor eyesight and was prescribed glasses, but he didn't wear them.
He probably was made fun of for them.
I think he just didn't like how he looked in them and threw them away. He also had, like, social anxiety, was afraid to speak in class, so he just didn't participate.
I'm shocked that with all of the head injuries, he didn't have, like, a stutter.
Yeah, I don't think he did. I didn't read anything about him having any kind of, like, speech impediment.
Yeah, because, I mean, I don't know the relationship between head injuries and stutters and whatnot. I do know that there's a comedian that I really enjoy who has a stutter because of a head injury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think basically he got hit in the head with a baseball, or he got a head injury and then, like a, baseball practice or game or something, and then took a nap and woke up with a stutter.
Ooh, don't take a nap after your head injury.
I think that's the story. It's been a long time since I heard it.
Yikes.
But yeah, no, don't take a nap after
don't
a head
do that. I don't know if that's still protocol, but don't, just to be safe. To be safe.
No. Only after you've seen a medical professional and they have okayed you going to sleep.
Yes. This is a quote from one of his teachers. He seemed sort of lost. It didn't seem like he knew what was going on. I wasn't able to teach him anything. I don't think I ever saw him smile. No one could get through to him. He was a loner. He seemed to be in a fog, sort of sulky. He didn't have any friends in class.
You know what I really like about all of that?
What?
Teacher never called or insinuated that he was stupid.
Yeah, I do like that.
That's a good teacher.
That is a good teacher.
Like,
she said I couldn't teach him anything.
Yeah, I wasn't able to do it. I was not successful in teaching.
Couldn't get through to him.
Doesn't mean he's unteachable.
Yeah.
That's a good
teacher. Good observation,
Katy. That is a good teacher.
That's
because
a good teacher.
Everyone is teachable.
Yes.
It's just...
Yeah. She probably had, like, 30 other kids to teach.
Yes. Well, and, like, I've been in classes with other people who, they're struggling and they've asked, like, hey, how does this work? Or, like, can you explain this? Or I don't understand. Like, we studied together, whatever. And I explained it in a way, and they're like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Like, no, I understand now. Like, basically, I explained it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so anytime I've ever, like, studied with someone or tutored someone or worked with, especially anytime I was, like, being study help for, like, younger people, every time I've explained how to do it, I've tried to explain it in a different way.
Yeah.
Because no one's unteachable.
Yeah, I agree.
You're not stupid.
I'm not stupid. In his case, he just had several head injuries and also couldn't see.
Yeah, no wonder he was lost. He couldn't see the board.
He couldn't see anything.
I also struggled to see, until I finally got glasses.
Oh, gosh. So he repeated the 8th grade. This is also the time in 1955 when he was arrested for the first time for trespassing. Then when he got to the 9th grade, he failed every subject in his first semester, and then he dropped out right when the second semester started. So right after he turned 16, he just completely dropped out of school. I believe after this, I kind of left a little gap here. He, I think, gets a job and whatever. He is able to work. And then in October of 1961, when he's 20, he meets Shirley Malone, who is 15, at the Texas State Fair. And they began dating, and 3 weeks later, she was pregnant, which might mean that she was pregnant when they were dating. Because how soon do you know? How soon
For me...
I mean, okay, let me rephrase. In 1961, how soon would you know?
Well, also, did they know 3 weeks into dating that she was pregnant? Or did they do the math later and realize...
That's true.
Like, okay, I must have become pregnant, 3 weeks after we met.
I have heard both. I've heard... because I think later Richard tries to say that, like, she was pregnant when he met her. The baby wasn't his. Then it's like, no, that's stupid. The baby definitely was his.
It could be either way.
Yeah. Either way, she's 15 and pregnant. In January of 1962, they get married. Their daughter was born July 5th of 1962. Her name is Robbie Lynn Speck. Richard was in jail when she was born. He was serving a 22-day sentence for disturbing the peace because he was drunk doing something. Richard...
Trying to make the pain in his head go away.
Good grief. Richard and Shirley, after they got married, they moved in with Carolyn, his little sister, and her husband, and then their mother had left Carl and was also living with them.
Well, now that her children are grown and out of the house,
yes,
she doesn't have to take care of them anymore, so she can figure something else out.
Richard and Shirley's marriage was not a good one.
I'm shocked. This is surprising information.
Right? Some sources...
A 16-year-old is not suited for marriage?
Well...
Because I'm assuming she's 16 by this point.
Yes. Some sources say that Richard was physically and sexually abusive to Shirley throughout their marriage.
Again, surprising information.
I know, right?
The man who abuses alcohol and drugs to cope with the long-term side effects of multiple head injuries is physically and emotionally abusive?
Violent? Yeah, like...
no!
So shocking.
Especially after being raised by a mean
I know!
drunk.
It's like...
Oh, wow.
It's like this man with brain damage who is constantly...
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of a thing.
You know. Despite the failing marriage, Richard's sisters did insist that he, like, was very much devoted to his daughter, was very good with kids. Like, he had a side to him when he wasn't drinking and doing drugs that was, like, loved his daughter, loved his nieces, all that stuff.
Well, and that's the other thing, like, kind of looking at, how we like to look at these bad people who do bad things. Mm-hmm. They're not just bad people. They're more. Yeah. Like, one of my biggest things is you can do both.
Yeah, you can be both.
Like, I especially want that to be, like, a message to, like, young girls. Like, you can be both. Mm-hmm. You can be into science, and you can like getting your nails done.
Yeah.
You can like sports and baking.
Like that new podcast.
Yes, Champagne and Sports. Yeah. I don't know if she's up and running yet, but definitely bookmark it, because as soon as she is, like, I'm going to go listen. But yeah, Champagne and Sports. You can do both.
Yeah.
You can do horrible, horrible things.
Don't do those things.
Don't. Like, yeah, no. You shouldn't.
Yeah, don't.
I'm not giving you permission. Thank you for clarifying. Oh, no. Oh, you want to go murder somebody? Go for it. You can do that.
Don't do that.
No, that is not what I'm saying. No. As Walker's, no.
No. But you could.
Some people
do
bad things, but they also do nice things.
Yes.
That went off the rails real fast.
So sorry.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is you're more than
the worst thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you're more than your job. You're more than your whatever. Like,
yes.
You can be... I mean, there's lots of instances of, like, the serial killers and murderers and whatnot who are also loving, like, loving husbands and fathers.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. I was going to say wives and mothers, but I don't really hear many stories.
We don't serial kill. We just poison bad people.
Yeah, it's uncommon for women to be serial killers. Yeah. And usually the ones that are not also loving mother. Except for my favorite, Serial Mom. It's a John Waters film.
Oh.
We should... Oh, let's do... That'll be our movie marathon, is John Waters movies.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yeah, Serial Mom is... Okay. She's like the epitome of the, like, happy, always put together 50s housewife. It's not set in the 50s. It's set in the 90s or whatever. She's loving wife and mother. But she has a very strong sense of justice and takes that justice into her hands. And,
nice.
You know, you don't wear white shoes after Labor Day.
God, no. Why would you?
You do if you want to get murdered.
Oh, that's her sense of justice. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay.
I haven't seen that movie in forever.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, let's see. A year after his daughter was born, Richard was convicted of forgery and burglary and goes back to prison for 3 years. He gets sentenced to 3 years. He gets paroled after 2 years. And then as soon as he's paroled, he is arrested a week later for attacking a woman in a parking lot with a 17-inch carving knife. Didn't, like, attack her, just, like... Threatened her. So he goes back to prison, but he was released after 6 months due to, like, a clerical error. So he is out of jail. He gets a job at a meat company as a driver. He eventually gets fired from that, not because of the 6 accidents that he had in the company truck, but because he was late for work. So, in December of 1965, he moves in with a 29-year-old divorced woman to babysit her kids. It was kind of weird. Unimportant.
People take interesting journeys.
She was also an ex-professional wrestler, according to Wikipedia.
Whoa.
I know. Strange. In January of 1966, Shirley files for divorce. That same month, Richard got into a fight at a local bar and stabbed a man. He's charged with...
He probably got sick of getting hit in the head and losing consciousness.
I know, right? Like, if that's...
He's like, I'm going to stop losing these fights.
I'm going to bring a knife
I'm going to
bring a knife to a head hitting fight. He gets charged with aggravated assault. It gets reduced to disturbing the peace. He pays a $10 fine. He gets 3 days in jail.
I'm sure the other party is why it got reduced.
Yeah. So after his divorce from Shirley is finalized, and truly even before that, Richard had begun harboring a very deep-seated hatred for her. He had become convinced that she was cheating on him. Unclear from what I read if she was or wasn't. I mean, not a reason to, like, assault anyone. Yeah. But when she got remarried shortly after the divorce, it made him even madder and made him hate her even more.
They still only had the one kid, right?
Yes, they only have one kid. In March of 1966, he buys a car and robs a grocery store. And then he abandoned the car. And
I feel like I would steal the car and buy groceries.
Right? But the police traced the car and issued a warrant for his arrest. So now there's a warrant out for his arrest in Texas. So he's like, I got to get out of Dallas. So a couple days later, he gets Carolyn to drop him off at a bus depot, and he takes the bus up to Chicago. Doesn't stay in Chicago very long. From Chicago, he goes back to Monmouth, whatever, his hometown. And there he goes to the Christie Hotel in downtown. That's where he's going to, like, live for a little bit. He was apparently holding down a job sanding plasterboard, but he spent a lot of his time drinking at local bars. During one evening drinking with friends in nearby Gulfport, he reportedly pulled a knife on a man in one bar, and the police had to be called, although they didn't arrest anyone.
Just diffuse the situation.
Yeah. And then, on April 3rd, a woman named Virgil Harris, who's 65.
A woman named Virgil?
A woman named Virgil Harris.
Okay.
Came home. So she's 65. She comes home from babysitting around 1 a.m. and there is a man in her house with a knife. She described him as 6 feet tall, quote, very polite, and that he spoke, quote, very softly and with a southern drawl. This man tied her up, sexually assaulted her, trashed her house, and stole the $2.50 that she had made from babysitting, which is only $20. Pay your babysitters better. Also,
what time did she get home?
1 a.m. Who is letting the 65-year-old woman babysit until 1 a.m. and only paying her $20?
Not cool, man.
I know. Also, I would be giving a much less flattering description of this burglar
after he sexually
after he like assaults you. Gosh, Virgil. Sorry, I'm not blaming Virgil at all.
No. More, let's blame society that conditioned her to still be polite.
I know. She's like, oh, he was very polite. He did rape me, but... So that was on the 3rd. 10 days later, a woman named Mary Catherine Pierce, who's 32, was reported missing after having left her job at a local bar on the 9th. So she's last seen on the 9th, is reported missing on the 13th. Also on the 13th, her body was found behind the bar where she worked.
I have issues with that.
Which are what?
That's too many days.
I agree.
Between the time that she was last seen to when people finally decided to be like, oh, we haven't seen in a couple of days.
Mary Catherine, where is she?
Also, behind the bar is where the trash cans and things are. That's also, even if there's not trash cans back there, that's also where bartenders and such, bar workers go to have their smoke breaks.
Yeah.
And what year is this? People are definitely smoking.
Yeah, it's the 60s.
Why was she not found before then? People are behind the bar, I guarantee it.
Well, she was found in an empty hog house that was behind the bar.
A hog house?
I don't know. I don't know if that means like a pigsty or a pig pen. I don't know. Do you want to know what her cause of death was?
I mean, you're going to tell me. I don't know if I want to know, but yeah.
It was a blow to the abdomen that ruptured her liver.
Oh my God.
I know. That's possibly the worst. Because that wasn't, I mean, I don't want to say that wasn't intentional, but like, that wasn't a quick death.
No.
And it probably
very
wasn't.
Painful.
It probably,
and very slow, right?
Yeah, it probably wasn't intentional.
Oh, this is why I need Barry to... He's the only doctor I
know. So anyways, Richard was briefly questioned because he frequented this bar and because he had helped build the hog house where she was found. And then the police were like, well, just stay in town in case we need to ask you any more questions. And he was like, yeah, okay, sure. And then on the 19th, the police were like, oh, we're going to go ask that guy Richard some more questions. And they went to his hotel room, and he was gone. But in his hotel room, they found items that Miss Virgil Harris had reported stolen from her house, and also items that had been reported missing in other local burglaries. And I will go ahead and tell you that this is the last we're going to hear about these cases. So there's not any closure on Mary Catherine. Sorry. But there's also a bunch of worse stuff that's about to happen. So Richard had gone back to Chicago and was staying with his sister Martha and her family. Martha's husband, Gene, was able to help Richard find work with the U.S. Coast Guard, because apparently the Coast Guard was just taking
anybody?
Anyone.
I think they've upped their standards.
They were... I don't know what the deal here was, but like you just had to get like a application to work on a ship or something.
Also, this isn't a Chicago?
This isn't... Yeah, this is Chicago.
And it's the Coast Guard?
Yes.
Not much coast out there.
They've got
There's a couple of lakes around.
Yeah. That's probably what they're talking about.
It's easier to work on a lake.
Well, that's what he does. I assume, because he found work on a ship for a short time. He was eventually kicked off the ship in June for getting drunk and fighting with one of the officers, which is not something you do.
Mm-mm.
And on July 8th...
They'll take anybody, but you still gotta respect rank.
Yeah. On July 8th, Gene drove him to the National Maritime Union Hiring Hall, where he would spend the next few days trying to obtain another work assignment. So he had been staying with Martha and Gene, and Martha had essentially said at this point, like, can't stay here anymore. Go find somewhere else to stay while you wait for a work assignment.
Wait, who's Martha again?
His sister.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm sorry.
One of his multiple sisters. Yeah. So he's kind of wandering around. He stayed at a boarding house one night. He slept in like an unfinished building one night. On July 13th, he gets fed up because the NMU, the National Maritime Union place, they had told him that they had a work assignment for him, but when he got there, it had already been filled. So he was like pissed off.
I read an article recently about a woman who was basically interviewed for a job, and she was hired and like relocated from Florida to Virginia or vice versa or something. Basically sold everything in her state, moved to another, showed up at the job, actually worked for about a week or whatever, and then was informed by HR that she was never actually hired. So not only was she not getting any kind of like relocation benefit, she worked for several days.
Jeez.
Not getting paid for it. And it's because like the hiring manager or whatever, who basically she had never gotten the formal offer letter.
Oh.
Like everything was informal. So I don't know what the resolution was on that. You can go look it up.
You got to sign that paper before you move. Yeah. Well, Richard's pissed off, so he's like, I'm just going to go out drinking. So that's what he does.
Great solution.
Yeah.
This is one of those times where the whole argument that alcohol technically is a solution. No.
So he is out drinking all day. According to him, later he was also doing various drugs. But that is unproven. At some point, he assaulted a woman that he met at a bar named Ella Mae Hooper, who was 53.
How old is he at this point?
He's like 25. He raped her and stole a small handgun that she had. So now he's got a gun.
Why wasn't she able to use and threaten him with the handgun? Like, that's why you have it. To protect yourself.
I know.
Oh, that's upsetting.
I know. So now he's got a gun. He goes out to dinner. He goes out drinking some more until 10:20. And then he goes walking. And around 11 p.m., Richard ends up at 2319 East 100th Street, which is a townhouse in the south side of Chicago that was serving as a dormitory for student nurses. Did you ever watch American Horror Story?
Yes. We've talked about it a lot of times.
I know. The way I found the story was the true stories that inspired, or not inspired, but like that the true people that some characters in American Horror Story were based off of. And
I think I saw that article. I didn't read it, but in Murder House, at one point that house was a housing facility or whatever. Like, it wasn't a dorm, but it was a housing for nurses.
Yes.
For women in nursing school.
Yes. So that's what this was. And it was housing, I believe at the time, 9 nurses. And they were American nurses. And then there was, I think, 3 Filipino nurses who were there on an exchange program. So Richard breaks in through the back door and goes upstairs and knocks on the door of one of the bedrooms. And
does he know?
No.
He just picked a house, or did he know that there was a bunch of women who lived here?
No, he just picks a place. And at this point,
so he just got lucky that it wasn't a bunch of burly dudes who would beat the stuffing out of him.
Yes.
Or B, a family home or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And at this point, he is, according to everything that I have read, so when he would drink and do drugs, he would essentially black out. Which, if you don't know what that means, it means you're... John Mulaney has a funny thing about that where it's like, it's when your body keeps going and your brain says, good night, or something. So essentially, like, you lose chunks of time.
It's kind of like being on autopilot and giving into, like, your id.
Yes. And he would later admit that happened to him a lot when he was drinking and doing drugs. So this is essentially...
More shocking information.
I know, right? So this is essentially what has happened, is that he's been drinking all day. He's been doing drugs, allegedly. And he has found himself...
You don't have to say allegedly. Like, I believe it.
I know. It just was never proven, so whatever. Okay, so he's inside this house. He knocks on a bedroom door. Your next picture is of...
Forgot I had pictures.
I know. Corazon Amora, I think is how I'm going to say her name.
Okay.
She was 23, and she answered her bedroom door because she was in her bedroom. And now Richard is standing there with a knife and a gun.
Where did he get the knife?
He just had one.
Okay.
He just always has one now, I guess. And he said, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm only going to tie you up. I need your money to go to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And
accurate.
So Corazon is like, whatever you say, sir, with the gun and the knife.
I would be like, actually, you know what? You can have my money, but let's go across the hall. Let's wake everyone up. Let's get everyone in the house awake and get all of their money together. Not so that there's more of us against the one of you, and not so that, like, one of us can break away and call police or anything, but, like, so you can have more money because you have got to get to New Orleans.
Yes.
The food is amazing.
Well,
I'm going to go ahead and take a sip based on your look.
So
you were giving me the take a sip eyes.
Yeah. Well, so he goes into her bedroom where there's 2 other nurses. And then there's 3 other nurses in the house. So he, like, gathers everyone together, and they are like, this is where I'm at. Let us get our purses. They do exactly what you said, which is, let us get our money for you. Here is our money. Please take it. And according to later testimony, like, he was talking to them, like, calmly. They described him as polite, calm. Like, he was repeatedly saying, like, I'm just here for the money, etc. He had all 6 of them, however, lie down on the floor. And then he took a bedsheet and he carefully tore it into strips and tied them up. And this whole time he's repeatedly saying, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want the money. At 11:30, Gloria Davy, who is 22, you can look at the next one. It's a picture of all of the nurses. Gloria Davy returned home from a date. When she comes home, Richard meets her at the door. I actually think she comes home and was able She didn't know what was going on, obviously. She came home and called her parents and said, I'm home for my date. And then she hung up, and then he confronted her and took her to the back room. And then at midnight, Suzanne Ferris, who was 21, came home with a friend, Marianne Jordan, who was 20. And Marianne didn't even live there. She was just visiting. She was going to spend the night. And he also took them into the back room and tied them up. After he gets all of their money, after he has tied everyone up, one by one, Richard began to select a girl and lead her out of the room. Mm-mm. And the other girls...
Don't be isolated.
The other girls only heard muffled sounds from that point on. They didn't hear any screams, but they heard some muffled sounds. He would be gone 20 to 30 minutes, but then he would come back and he would get another girl. During one of the times that he was gone, Corazon rolled underneath one of the beds. And Richard apparently had lost count of how many women he had tied up or how many women there were to start because he had brought in multiple. And he forgot. He didn't come looking for her. He forgot that she was there. And she stayed there until 6 a.m. until she finally believed that it might be safe to come out. And she was able to free herself from her bindings and very carefully left the room. And upstairs, she found the bodies of her friends. There was Patricia I'm so sorry for their names that I'm going to mess up. Patricia Matusek, who was 20. Marianne Jordan and Suzanne Ferris were both found in the doorway of Corazon's bedroom. Pamela Wilkening, also 20. And then Valentina Pazion, Merlita Gargulo, and Nina Schmale, who were 23, 22, and 24. They were all found in another separate bedroom. They had all been strangled to death, and all but Patricia had multiple stab wounds. So Corazon breaks through the window screen in her bedroom, and because she's scared to go downstairs, and climbs out onto the 2-foot ledge that is 10 feet off the ground, and just begins screaming for help. She says, quote, "My friends are all dead, all dead, all dead. I'm the only one alive. Oh God, the only one. My friends are all dead." And fortunately, several people heard her, including a police officer. So, like, she's okay.
I'm glad that somebody heard her before Richard heard her.
Yes, Richard is gone.
I figured he had left, maybe he had by this point passed out and was dead to the world after all of the drinking and the exhaustion of, murdering people, strangling is, I'm sure, very exhausting
difficult,
work. Like,
it's
very physical.
Yeah.
Like, you really gotta work to strangle somebody.
Yeah. So Officer Daniel Kelly was the police officer who was just on patrol who heard her, and he was the first one on the scene and entered the house through the back door that had been broken. And he unfortunately discovered Gloria Davy. She was the only one downstairs, and she was lying naked on the sofa in the living room. She had also been strangled to death. Later examination would indicate that she had possibly been sodomized, and later testimony indicated that she had been sexually assaulted, and she was the only one of the women who was found without clothes on. So, like, special attention was paid to her.
And hold on, did she come home?
Yeah, she came home.
She was the one who came home from the date.
Yes, she came home from her date. Yeah. And there's a reason that we find out later, sort of, why he seemed to pay more attention to her.
And she's very pretty.
She is very pretty.
It's funny looking at these pictures, these hairstyles.
Oh, I know. They're...
It's... I'm imagining, I'm like... I mean, well, if you look at Valentina, like, you don't have to change her hair much and just add color to the photo, and she would be a bombshell by today's standards.
Yeah.
Same thing with Merlita Gloria. Now, Marianne, she reminds me of, like, Kirsten Dunst.
Let me see. Oh, yeah, she does.
Like, if you just, you know...
She has that smile.
Yeah, it's something about, like, the shape of the eyes and the smile.
Yeah.
But, like, basically, if you change the hair, like, you know, even the
helmet hair.
obviously beautiful as... I don't want to say unfortunate looking, but, like...
Yeah.
Honestly, like, you could just change the hairstyle. Definitely if, like, Pamela... she's the one that, like... do away with the hair and just look at her, like, eyes and whatnot.
Yeah.
If you change the hair,
yeah,
freaking knockout.
I know a couple of them have a like helmet hair.
Oh, they.
I mean, very stylish for the time.
Yeah, stylish for the time, but not flattering to their facial features.
So Corazon was taken to South Chicago Community Hospital and given a sedative to help calm her down.
Oh, because I would also be freaking the fuck out.
Thank God. But she was able to give police a description of Richard, and by 8:30 that morning, that description had been sent out to all patrolling cars in the area. They actually got Richard's name fairly quickly because someone was able to tell them that a man matching the description was looking for work at the NMU. And so, like, they knew who he was. It took him a minute to track him down. But
he wasn't really living anywhere, right?
Yeah, and it was like, they were just always a couple steps behind him. It was like, they'd get there and they'd be like, oh, he just left. So it wasn't until the early hours of July 16th that he was actually, quote, captured.
I don't like that you used quote there.
Well, the reason is because Richard had tried to commit suicide at this sketchy motel where he had been staying. So remember how I said he was in like a state of being blacked out, essentially. So what he would later tell this psychiatrist was that he woke up the next day and didn't know anything had happened.
Didn't realize that he had murdered several women.
But he eventually hears his name on the radio. They're saying, we're looking for Richard Speck because he murdered 8 women. And he's freaking out because he thinks, well, I don't remember what happened the other night. If they're saying I did it, I must have. And he also has severe brain, like...
He's not firing on all cylinders.
Yes. He's very prone to, like, depressive moods.
He's also sexually assaulted several other women at this point. Like, he knows that...
He knows he's prone to violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
I feel like him believing, like, oh, I don't remember doing it, but I could totally see myself murdering women.
Yes,
sure.
Like, he knows he's prone to violence in these situations. And so he tried to take his own life. It didn't work, though. And so when it didn't work, he sought help. And so an ambulance was called. He gets taken into this hospital. And the resident physician who was attending to him thought he looked familiar, and then ultimately recognized a tattoo that he had on his arm, which was part of the description. And the tattoo said, "Born to Raise Hell," which is the name of the book that I read. So once Richard was stable, police officially arrested him, and he was held at Bridewell Prison Hospital. And a few days later, Corazon officially identified him as the murderer. On July 26th of 1966, a grand jury indicted Richard for the murders of Gloria, Patricia, Pamela, Marianne, Suzanne, Valentina, Merlita, and Nina. And then while Richard was in prison awaiting trial, this is when he begins to regularly be seen by Dr. Zaporin. And this is where I thought, like, it was very interesting because he's being seen, I think, twice a week, essentially by a therapist. Mm-hmm. And, like, during the trial, they also end up having, like, a panel of, I think, 8 psychiatrists and psychologists examine him, like, for the purposes of the trial. But this is separate. Like, Dr. Zaporin is doing his own thing.
Well, I wonder if any part of it was, like, the, examining on the, I guess the panel was more to determine whether or not he's, like, mentally fit to stand trial.
Yeah, exactly. So Dr. Zaporin determined that Richard was probably not schizophrenic, but this is where Richard admitted to regular drug use, starting from when he was a teen. 2 of the drugs that he admitted using were sodium amytal, which is also known as amibarbital, which is approved to treat anxiety, epilepsy, and insomnia. But when given intravenously and slowly, it can act as a truth serum and also get you high, I guess. And then sodium seconal or secobarbital, which was originally marketed also to treat epilepsy and insomnia, but was widely used recreationally in the 60s. And both of these drugs have side effects that include agitation and irritability.
Those are barbiturates.
Yes.
I was like, the Bital.
Yeah.
At
barbital.
the end. Barbital at the end. I'm like, I think those are barbiturates.
Which I don't really know the significance of that.
I have a joke. If you want a little
sure.
episode palate cleanser.
Lighten up the mood.
Bear walks into a bar, sits down next to a woman, turns and immediately mauls and devours this woman.
Oh my gosh.
And he's done. And he turns to the bartender. He orders a drink. And the bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve drug users here." And the bear says, "What are you talking about?" Bartender says, "What about that?" Or no, the bear says, "What are you talking about? I'm not a drug user. I don't do drugs." Bartender says, "Well, what about that barbiturate?" I don't know why it was a bear. I guess because bears can eat people.
Yeah. You could replace it with any kind of man-eating creature. Crocodile.
A lion. Crocodiles, yeah. The barbiturate.
That's weirdly relative to this episode. Creepy. Ooh.
Sorry for the poor delivery on that joke. Shelton hasn't told it in a while.
Nice.
He has like 5 that he tells all the time, and like 2 of them are ones that I told him that he's stolen.
Nice. I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Richard also tells Dr. Zaporin that when he drank, he often got violent. So he, again, knows this about himself. And when he took drugs, he often would black out and lose chunks of time.
He's 100% mentally fit to stand trial. Like,
yeah.
He is not existing in a world where, right and wrong have different meanings.
Yes, exactly.
Like, he knows that murdering people and sexual assault is not okay.
Yes.
And he's just, in an altered mindset that allowed him to forget that, I guess.
Yes.
But ultimately, when sober,
yes,
he knows right from wrong and
yes,
should be held accountable for it.
So he claimed that he didn't remember the murder of the 8 women. Initially, he said he only remembered from about 8 o'clock that evening to when he woke up the following morning. And this is when he said he heard on the radio that the police were looking for him, and that's, when he decided.
Did he also realize, wait, there's a gun in my pocket? I didn't have a gun before. When did I get that?
He did find the gun and said he had no idea how he got it. He couldn't figure it out because he slowly does kind of remember parts of like leading up to that evening and remembers like, oh yeah, I was with a lady.
Random flashes.
Yeah. I don't think he ever, from what I could tell, fully remembered the whole night. Dr. Zaporin noticed over time that Richard was prone to like mood swings, which for him meant going from like relatively cheerful to depressed to violent. And he said that these were like pretty typical of essentially brain damage.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew someone who had been in a really bad car accident. And basically who they were after the accident, like they had a full personality transplant, basically. But he was in a coma for quite some time, had serious brain damage. But his temper was on a hair trigger.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was like this before, because I only knew him after. But a full-blown narcissist, too.
Oh, wow.
And again, I don't know if that was, if he was already, a narcissist. Or if this was something that came out of his brain injury.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's like maybe my first narcissist that I've ever tangled with.
Yeah.
Or at least the first one that I was aware of.
Yeah.
And he's like my textbook case. And also someone I'm glad I don't know anymore.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like because some of our mutual friends did know him before the accident, and they were like, yeah, no, like he's mostly the same, but he definitely is different.
Yeah.
And then especially when his temper flares or whatever, like he didn't used to just on a dime.
Yeah.
Like it was, you had no idea what would trigger it. And it's just all of a sudden he was laughing, smiling. Somebody said the wrong thing and it would set him off.
Yeah.
And you could say that 9 other times and it would be fine. But for some reason, this one time.
That one time.
But yeah, now he major brain injury. And that was just the one.
Yeah. Just the one. Imagine
lots.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that like throughout this, Richard is telling Dr. Zaporn of like, he'll just like randomly mention another time he got like, hit in the head, like as an adult. And Dr. Zaporn is like, I don't know how many of these I can really believe, like, I don't know how much he's exaggerating or whatever, but, and he kind of joked, like, you seem very like accident prone, like you're kind of prone to getting like hit in the head. But it was kind of true. Is like, stop. I don't know, like, yeah, wear a helmet, man. Like, at this point.
I wonder how much of, like, the problem begets the problem kind of a thing. Like, after the first several injuries, like, yeah, there was a couple of accidents. But after a couple, I feel like there was, falling out of the tree twice. And then there was accidentally hitting yourself with the hammer. But then from there on out, it was mostly fights.
Yeah.
And I think it just led to reckless behavior.
Yeah.
And he
like,
just no longer became concerned with protecting his head or avoiding
that's true.
instances where, because I think after the first couple of accidents, it was all fights.
Yeah. Dr. Zaporn theorized that Richard held an unconscious or conscious resentment or hatred towards women that was rooted in his hatred for Shirley, his wife, ex-wife, and his anger at his mother for marrying Carl.
Okay.
So, he calls it the Madonna prostitute complex, which is where, so Richard would think every woman is either a Madonna or a prostitute.
It's the Madonna and the whore.
Yeah. And there's no in between. Yeah. So, like, what you were saying earlier about, like, you can be both. Like, you can be... Not for Richard. No. You were either a whore or you were to be, like, revered and worshipped.
A good, wholesome woman.
Yes. So, like, it was, like, as soon as a woman started, like, coming on to him, or, like, if he thought a married woman was, like, showing any interest in him, or acting, like, or even if, like, you weren't married and you were, like, flirting with him and he thought you were being, like, too loose. Like, he would still have sex with you, but you were now a whore.
You were flirting, but you found out that, wait, hold on, you have kids? What are you doing in a bar flirting with me?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be a mother.
Yeah. And it's like, he would still sleep with you, but you were now in the whore category, And his mother was over here in the Madonna category, or whatever. So, Dr. Ziporyn believed that when Richard was in his blackout state on the night of the murders, when he was in a blackout state in general, he was more prone to violence, or just less able to control his tendencies in general. So, he thinks that possibly he went to the nurses' dorm just maybe with the intent of robbing. But if any of the nurses maybe were trying to
sweet talk him,
exactly, like, flirt with him or something to try to get him to, because appease him. Mm-hmm. That could have been his, like, trigger to be like, no. Also, he said when he was shown the pictures of these women that Gloria looked a lot like Shirley. So possibly just seeing Gloria could have been the trigger, where he saw someone who looked like his ex-wife that he hated so much. It also very certainly could have explained why he was so much more brutal to Gloria than to the rest of the women.
So, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
You are a scientist.
Yeah. Doesn't help me much on this one. And also, I don't know much about people with lots of traumatic brain injuries.
Yeah.
I can see where, how, and why Dr. Sapporo got the Madonna and the whore thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, maybe I just haven't heard enough about Dick Speck, and, I haven't been on,
you haven't been down the rabbit hole.
I haven't been in sessions with him. I think it might be not a cop-out, but, I can see him having some probably subconscious resentment for his mother for marrying whatever his stepfather...
Carl, yeah.
So, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And, it sounds real bad, the relationship with Shirley.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if those two instances are enough to really trigger. But again, he's also got a severely damaged brain.
Yeah. And this is I think a very simplified...
Yeah,
I think
I think that's my issue. Is I'm like, you're oversimplifying.
Yeah,
and I think you're also trying to blame those two bad relationships.
Yeah,
like, well, if his mom hadn't been such a whore and married this bad guy, and if his wife hadn't been such a whore and a terrible mother, he never would have done all these terrible things. Yeah, it's like, let's not blame those two women and their actions for his actions.
Yeah. I will say that he does go into more detail in the book. I mean, explaining it. And he talks about, I want to say, he does talk about, obsessive compulsive tendencies and, the rigidity of the way he believes things, and how, talking about how, there's no in-between, but he talks a lot about how, I don't want to explain it wrong. Almost like it's like you have a really strict moral code for other people. It's like women are treated fine until they do something that you see as bad.
Right.
And then you think it's okay. And then they should be punished in your eyes.
That's something we see a lot.
Yeah. And for him, it was probably just... for him, probably a lot of things were just amplified because of... he also made it sound like the brain injury just kind of made everything just a lot harder to control.
Well, and so kind of going back to his teacher's comment about how he seemed confused, because of all of his brain damage and issues and injuries and everything, I'm sure life was very confusing and complicated for him. So in order to survive, he had to see things in a black and white thing.
Yeah.
To make sense of the world around him without being completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's too much going on. There's too much gray. I need black and white.
Yes, I agree. So at the end of October, a panel of psychiatrists who had examined Richard separate from what Dr. Zaporin was doing concluded that he was competent to stand trial. Mm-hmm. Richard's lawyer asked that the trial be moved out of Chicago, which was granted because of all of the press coverage and everything. And at the competency hearing, the psychiatric panel stated that they had diagnosed Richard as having, quote, sociopathic personality, antisocial behavior with alcoholism, and that they believed that he was aware and responsible for his actions at the time of the murder.
So, I kind of want to disagree with the sociopathic thing, but as we just said, like, I don't know if it necessarily was that he was a sociopath so much as he intentionally saw the world a certain way in order to make sense of it.
Yeah.
He only saw black and white.
Yeah.
He only saw good or bad, right or wrong.
Yeah.
Because everything else was too much. It was overwhelming and confusing. Or if he legitimately was a sociopath, and I don't think that's anything we'll ever know.
Yeah.
And then as far as aware, again, I'm not excusing him being like, oh, I mean,
yeah,
he didn't know he was murdering because he was black under. No, he definitely did it. He should not have, like, if he was aware that he was prone to violence and prone to blackouts,
he should have been, yeah, exactly.
No more drinking. Don't put yourself into situations where you black out and do bad things.
Well, Dr. Zaporin disagreed with this panel.
Okay.
Specifically on the sociopath. Well, on both parts.
So I'm with the doctor.
Yes,
okay.
You're with the doctor. So
who also has spent a lot more time than this panel, I'm sure.
And I think we both probably agree are on the same page as far as he was not. I don't think it's fair to say that he was aware and responsible for his actions at the time. Like, that's a direct contradiction of what happened. He was not aware of his actions. Yeah. He may have been responsible.
Yes, in that he did them. Like, he put himself into the situation where he was blackout drunk, or he was inebriated and, like, in a altered mental state.
Yes. He was responsible for getting himself into that state knowingly and willingly.
Yes.
But he was not aware of what he was doing at the time.
So he should be held accountable for the actions, even though he was not aware of the actions at the time.
Exactly. Yes.
So 100%. Okay. You did it.
Yes.
You need to be punished for your crimes.
Yes.
Even if you don't remember committing them.
Yes.
Okay. Now that we've hammered that out.
Okay, so the sociopath part. So Dr. Zaporin said sociopaths are self-seeking. And I'm just going off of his definition. I did not. And it might have changed.
I still cannot differentiate between sociopath and psychopath.
All I know is psychopaths don't have any empathy. So sociopaths are self-seeking and would look for a way out of the trouble that they were in. And Richard was accepting the fact that he had committed the murders, even though he couldn't remember them. So the whole time he had been saying, I must have done it, I just don't remember. Yeah.
And I was about to say, well, he did try and get out of it by committing suicide, but that's different than when you say, like, trying to get out of it, like, that would be replacing blame. Or
yes.
I couldn't have done it. It must have been some other thing. Whatever.
So he wasn't refuting any of the evidence against him. So they had fingerprints, they had Corazon's testimony. And he also wasn't trying to make up any stories or explain why he had been at the house. I think there's a rumor going around that he had, like, dated one of the girls. And, like, Dr. Zaporin was like, he could make up any reason why he was at the house. Like, he could say he had helped move furniture and that's why his fingerprints were there. Like, that's what a sociopath would do, is, like, explain. Also, despite Dr. Zaporin repeatedly explaining to Richard that his head injuries could be very significant in the case and that he should mention them to the psychiatrists when the psychiatrists on this panel were interviewing him, Richard, did not bring them up. He was like, I didn't tell them unless they asked me. So he, was not actively seeking a way to, help his situation. Also, sociopaths don't usually feel anxiety or guilt, and Richard was showing evidence of both of those things while in prison.
He tried to commit suicide before he was ever even arrested.
Yes.
Before he even had, all of the evidence presented to him. He heard a snippet on the radio.
Mm-hmm. And felt guilty.
He heard his bolo on the radio and was like, oh my gosh. Apparently I murdered women?
Yeah.
And obviously felt guilty about it.
Yes. And then his violent impulses, or his violence was impulsive rather than calculated, which, whatever. Mm-hmm. The psychiatric panel also concluded that Richard...
Impulsive and opportunistic, I think.
Wait, what?
Impulsive...
Mm-hmm. Versus opportunistic?
Opportunistic.
And opportunistic.
Yeah.
Okay.
He just showed up at the house and then realized there was a whole bunch of women here.
Yeah.
Okay, we're, this isn't what
I planned.
My impulsive decision to break into this house and tie up this woman and steal her money. Mm-hmm. But there's other women that I can also tie up and rob, and now I'm going to murder her.
Yes. The panel also concluded that Richard did not have any brain damage. Because the EEGs that they performed on him didn't show any. It's the 1960s, by the way. I guarantee the EEGs were not 100% accurate then. They're not 100% accurate now, I don't think.
And it's just, EEGs is just electrical, pulses and whatnot, right? He would need an actual, scan.
I'm pretty sure, I tried to look this up briefly. And all the internet will tell you is that, yes, EEGs can diagnose traumatic brain injury, but they can also, they can help diagnose it, but, you can have traumatic brain injury, and I'm sure...
And have a clean EEG. But, I think if you have an actual scan where your brain is imaged, it shows where the activity is.
Yeah. And I think they even said that, there were some abnormalities, but they were normal for someone who, I want to say was, 12 or 13. He also had a very low IQ. I want to say his mentality was somewhere around 10 to 12. Not to bring up Sam again, but a lot of parallels.
But you're going to bring him up anyway.
I am going to bring him up because I love him. A lot of parallels to Sam, except Sam wasn't, violent. In that he wasn't. Listen.
I'm going to go re-listen to that episode, but I specifically remember some violence.
We'll go over it. But, brain injuries, low IQ, mentality of essentially a child, not understanding the consequences of actions, it's how you end up in bad situations.
Yeah. And
without
he did
help.
understand the consequences of his actions, but after.
Yes.
It wasn't until after that he's like, oh, I messed up.
Yes.
But
not
in the moment.
Yeah.
But also he was in an altered mindset, so who's to say what he knew when he was committing his crimes?
Yes, it's true. So his trial began on April 3rd of 1967, and it was moved to Peoria, Illinois.
Peoria.
Thank you, Peoria. It lasted less than 2 weeks. The main evidence for the prosecution was Corazon's testimony, which she very dramatically, positively ID'd Richard in court. She got up.
That man right over there.
Literally got up from the witness stand and was him, walked over to him and, pointed. Good for her. Brave. Mm-hmm. And then also Richard's fingerprints were in the house. Also.
What was his plea? All right. I'll let you continue. You're clearly going to get to that.
Well, what would you think a good plea for him would be?
I mean, he can't go not guilty by reason of insanity, but, like, along a similar thing, not guilty by reason of
mental defect or something. Like, you would think something along those lines.
Or, like, you know, I was drunk off my gourd. I don't know. I don't think that's a legal jargon.
No, the defense said he's not guilty. He didn't do it. Someone else did it.
Just plain old not guilty.
They just said he was not the person there. It was someone else.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's
a...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's unclear if this ever came up in trial, but allegedly...
It must be a public defender, not a private attorney.
This guy is a whole thing. Allegedly, Richard had, quote, confessed while he was at the hospital where he was being treated for his suicide attempt. But he was under sedation at the time, so, like, it's not really super clear.
Well, also, he's probably, like, why, you know, he was probably asked, why did you try to commit suicide? And he's like, well, I murdered these women, or, like, I heard that he murdered these women. So it wasn't a straight-up confession so much as a... Yeah. This was information that was presented to me, and this is my response to it.
Lost a ton of blood, like... Not a good situation. Mm-hmm. And the Cook County State Attorney, John Stamos, said that they didn't need a confession because their other evidence was so strong. I just need to keep that in there because the attorney's name was John Stamos. Dr. Zaporin was not called to testify on Richard's behalf or against him. So, like, neither the defense nor the prosecution called Dr. Zaporin, because it came out that Dr. Zaporin was writing a book, which was the book that I read. But the way they worded it was that he was writing a book for financial gain. And I'm like, yeah, that's why people write books.
He's got skin in this trial.
So, yeah, I guess they were worried that he would be seen as unreliable. Which I'm like, why couldn't you just wait a little bit to write your book?
Right. But also... Wouldn't you want to wait until after the trial to write the book, too?
And I don't know if,
like... start writing it, but don't tell anyone until after the trial, because the trial will bring up all the publicity, and then, like, while the name is still, like, in the media, then you're like, bam, I got a book coming out.
And it may have been that Richard said something, because he was just, like, didn't know when to not say stuff. So, essentially, everything that Dr. Zaporin believed about him not being a sociopath, and, like, his beliefs about him being blacked out and, like, not responsible, none of that was in the trial. So
it's basically everything that you and I
everything we've been talking about was not in the trial. So on April 15th, after 49 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Richard Speck guilty on all counts and recommended the death penalty. And on June 5th, Judge Herbert Passion sentenced Richard to execution by electric chair. Eek. However, here's some legal stuff. On June 28th of 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Richard's sentence, citing Witherspoon versus Illinois, which was a 1968 case, because 250 potential jurors in Richard's trial were excluded from the jury because they were against capital punishment. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And so his case was remanded back to the Illinois State Supreme Court for resentencing. But then on June 29th of 1972, so a year later, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Furman v. Georgia that the death penalty was unconstitutional. I did not know about this case, by the way. They just said, y'all can't execute people anymore. It's unconstitutional, which was actually, like, very interesting. We should do a mini episode on it. Mm-hmm. Because some of their, like, I think a lot of it was motivated by, like, we think y'all are using the death penalty as a way of, like, legally lynching black people, which was probably true. Mm-hmm. So they just made it illegal. But this ruling caused all pending death sentences at the time to be reduced to life sentences. Fun fact, after that, 37 states just made new death penalty laws to keep executing people. So Richard was resentenced in November of 1972 to 400 to 1,200 years in prison, which is 8 consecutive life sentences. Later reduced to 100 to 300, I guess, for...
Why?
I don't know.
Posterity?
Who knows? So while in prison, Richard was described more or less as a model inmate. He really didn't like the press because he got a lot of really bad press, like, during the trial. And he only ever granted one interview in 1978 to Bob Greene of the Chicago Tribune. A lot of sources say that this is the first time Richard ever, quote, publicly confessed to the murders. Although I would argue that he was, like, never denying the murders, so...
And well, there's a difference between confessing and not denying.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna read you the quote, because I was like, oh, let me hear what he said. He said, quote, "I had no feelings at all that night. They said there was blood all over the place. I can't remember. It felt like nothing. I'm sorry as hell. For those girls, and for their families, and for me. If I had to do it over again, it would be a simple house burglary."
Or not a burglary at all.
I mean,
or
yes.
Just go home and go to sleep.
But also, that's not a confession. That's just him continuing to say, I don't remember doing it.
I'm sorry for what happened.
I'm sorry. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I'm sure I did it. I don't remember. I'm sorry. He was nicknamed Birdman, fun fact, after Robert Stroud from Alcatraz, one of Sam's best friends. Birdman of Alcatraz. I will bring it up in every episode. Yes, I am making that a challenge. Because he kept a pair of sparrows as pets. However, there is a disturbing anecdote about him being told that he couldn't keep an injured bird that he had nursed back to health. And so he threw it into a fan and said, if I can't have it, no one can. And then in 1991, one day before his 50th birthday, Richard Speck died of a heart attack.
Heart issues apparently run in his family because his dad also died in his 50s of a heart attack.
However, I have one more thing to tell you.
I don't like how you phrased that. And also, he died. The story's over.
It's weird. So, in 1996, a video was anonymously released to Chicago news anchor Bill Curtis. This video was filmed in 1988 at the Statesville Correctional Center, which is where Richard was. It shows several prisoners, including Richard, doing cocaine, having sex with each other, and exchanging money.
Wow, there's a lot of things happening.
Richard appears to have changed his body some, in that he appears to have breasts. And I will say that when I first read this and when I first saw the parts of the video, I thought that maybe I was just like, no, that's just a man in his late 40s who has gained some weight. But when you watch the context of the video and so the allegation is that there some like hormone treatments had been smuggled in and it was done deliberately. And the video the context of the video and the things that he's saying and doing very much imply that. He's also wearing what appear to be like lacy women's underwear. He's asked by someone off camera if he has always liked having sex with men, to which he says yes. He is also asked at some point if he killed the nurses, and he says, which I didn't see this part of the video, he apparently says, quote, "Sure I did," and when asked why, he said, quote, "It just wasn't their night." And then he also at some point said, if they knew how much fun I was having, they'd turn me loose. Dr. Zaporin did have something to say about the video. which was that he thinks that Richard essentially was, like, punishing himself by, like, putting himself in the place of the girls that he killed and making, like, allowing himself to be, like, victimized in that way.
I'm wondering if there's also not, like, a touch of, like, a Stockholm syndrome thing, like, or, like, he became the victim of a strong personality.
Yeah.
So that might have, you know, again, like, he's in this new world, new rules.
Yeah.
Very confusing and overwhelming. There might be a strong personality that come in to, like, offer protection, but also coercion.
Yeah.
And...
Well, he's doing drugs again. He's not mentally healthy. No. Like, so the way I see it is, like, he's doing drugs again. He's probably finding a way to drink again. Like, any number of things could be going on in his head. It's the 80s at this point. Like, you're right. There probably is some hierarchy that he has fallen into. It's just really weird and kind of unfortunate that it got on tape. And, like, I think people want to see that as, like, a confession and be like, oh, he really is a sociopath. See, like, he can... And it's like, no, he's just, like... severely brain damaged and also on cocaine. And
prison is a hard place for a mentally healthy person.
Yeah. So that's the very weird conclusion to the story of Richard Speck. But I couldn't not find out this whole story about, like, it's like, I don't know, it's like I read the first part of it, which was this horrific mass murder, essentially, it was like the first big mass murder in Chicago's history, I think. Well, okay, not. Hold on.
Maybe you want to walk that one back, or just have Jared cut that out completely.
Cut that part out. It was the first, I would think, the first major mass murder in, like, the 20th century in Chicago. No? What am I thinking?
Remember the Valentine's Day Massacre? Wasn't that in Chicago? Jared, cut all of this out.
Jeez. What did they say? What did I read? It was the first, I don't know. It was a big deal. It was the first, I don't know. It scared people. It was a big...
It's probably a mass murder by just a singular dude, not, like, mob related.
Yeah.
Or something, or not mob or gang related.
Yeah.
Just a random act of violence. Yeah. By a random guy.
With, like, not knowing the victim. Yeah. Like, that is very scary.
Just random violence.
Yeah. So, like, that's how it's...
With no plan, is just...
He just happens upon, and you just happen to be there, essentially. On one hand, that is what it is, or that is what happened, and that is the story. And, like, I don't want to minimize the victims and what happened to them, because it is horrific. But it's like, you can't look at that story and be like, and he's a terrible person and a sociopath who went to prison and got everything he deserved. It's like, wow, he had actually a really fucked up life, and could any of that
it's one of those, you know, like, violence begets violence kind of a thing. It's like, it wasn't that his life was that bad so much as
bad stuff happened to him.
There was some bad stuff that happened that changed him as a person, or, like, led him to make bad decisions that led to more bad things happening, that led to more bad decisions. Yeah. So, like, falling out of a tree, an issue with a hammer, childhood illness, like, those are all, that's just bad luck. Those are bad things that happened to him.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the abusive stepfather figure. Those are bad things that happened. And it could have gone, like, he could have maybe gone and been okay and lived, like, an unremarkable life.
Yeah.
but the odds, I think, were more heavily towards more risky behavior or more, like, acting out against, like, the abusive stepfather, getting into fights, which led to more brain injury, which led to more reckless behavior, which led to more injury, which...
Yeah.
I think it's that.
It is another one of those situations, too, where I wonder, like, if he had the because one of the things Dr. Zaporin had asked him at one point was, like, well, did you ever try to get help for your headaches? And he was like, that costs money. Like, going to the doctor costs money. And it's like, well, you're right. Mm-hmm. That does cost money. And I guess it is a lot easier and cheaper to self-medicate, which, I mean, could be said of anything today. Like, treating your anxiety with alcohol, don't do, is cheaper and easier sometimes than trying to go see a doctor that can listen to you. Or
definitely easier, even if you can afford the therapy.
Yeah.
That's still hard work.
Yeah, but it's like if he had the resources or had been given...
Not just the resources, but the support system, too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to have gotten help at some point for the brain injuries or, you know, the situation at home or anything, it's like, I don't know. I think that just comes back to, like, why I think it's so important to say, like, advocate for mental health, like, stand up for yourself, speak up for yourself.
And we're not saying that he's not a bad person that didn't do bad things.
Oh, no, he definitely did bad things.
He definitely did. And, again, you can be both. He can do bad things and, like, I hate labeling people as good or bad.
Yeah.
Because nobody is entirely one or the other.
Yeah.
But, like, he made bad decisions that put him in bad situations that led him to make more bad decisions. And, like, yes, the odds were definitely against him. But, like, we're not excusing him.
Right.
Or we're not saying, well, it wasn't really his fault. Like, it was society failed him and blah, blah, blah. Like, no. He still made those decisions. He still did the bad things. Like, he still needs to be punished for his actions.
It's just looking at the ways it could have been prevented that is interesting and sad and a way to, I think, look forward and say, well, if it could have been prevented then, let's remember that now so that we can prevent shit like that from... Let's do what we can now. We can't change anything then. We can only do what we can now.
Because, I mean, the saddest part is his victims.
Yeah.
Like, it's sad what happened to him.
Yeah.
And in the path that his life ultimately took. But the saddest part was, you know, the people that were victims of his, and Anyhow. Enough armchair psychology.
Anyways, thank you if you stuck around this long. I have no idea what next week's topic will be about because this was my hyperfixation for the week. But I love every one of you out there who listened, and we'll be back next week with something. And go back to the beginning to hear our socials, because we already did them.
Yeah, I'm not doing that again. I'm tired. I'm going home.
Okay.
I'm hungry.
Critter, goodbye.
Bye-bye.